Okay.
Today. There we go. I think this is all right.
Yep.
I think I'll survive here. Let's go to YouTube
Okay.
channel.
We're live.
Yeah, a little bit late today.
Yep.
A little bit late today.
We were
Whatever.
10 minutes. Whatever.
That's fine. It's fine. Yeah, to say the least. Definitely a tiring day. I never find this stupid thing on here. All right, where we are.
Yeah, three people watching. I just said good morning.
Well, good morning, everybody. As I find my phone, I gotta turn my audio down here. Okay. All right. I guess that's the best I'm gonna get. So, how are you today?
Good. I'm okay.
Yeah, I'd say so. But, no, it's cool. It's been a thing today. So yeah, so we're a few minutes late today. That's the way it is.
Good morning, Barbara. Good morning, David.
Everybody. Yeah, let's look at machine going here a little bit. I'm gonna switch this.
Good day yesterday at the vineyard.
Oh, yesterday was a lot of fun. That was a good day yesterday. We got to go to the vineyard, Martha's Vineyard yesterday. That was a good time. So yeah, I saw some interesting stuff. We didn't see a lot of Civil War. We did see some though. There's definitely some Civil War. They have
AQ says happy Grant Day.
That's right. Happy Grant Day. Yeah.
And then Frank said, good morning. Happy 162nd first bull run weekend.
There's a lot of stuff going on right now. There's a lot of stuff that we can certainly talk about. It's kind of a busy time in our little nerd world, but certainly U.S. Grant dying in Wilton, New York on this anniversary date of throat cancer.
Yep.
And I will 100% smoke a cigar today anyway, because whatever, can't live forever. I'm gonna try it this way. Here we go.
Good morning, Elsie.
Elsie, talked a lot about him yesterday.
Check out my shirt.
God.
I squint on it.
Yeah. So anyway, so we get to go to Joslyn yesterday. If anybody has not been out to Martha's Vineyard, I would definitely suggest you do it. It's a cool place to go, and there's a lot of history to it. And the funny part about the vineyard is it's almost the same. I've been going there for years and years and years, and virtually it's exactly the same place. And none of the buildings get torn down.
No.
And so it's fun. And it was the first time. For the first time, you're a big Jaws fan. Jaws.
Huge. Yeah.
And so for going to the vineyard for you, it's like almost like going to Gettysburg, because you get to see all the same things. If you see the movie, it's all the same.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Definitely.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, and just for people on here before we get to Civil War stuff, my mother was a huge Jaws fan, and she passed away in December, and she always wanted to go to see where they filmed it. So I did that for her yesterday, as well as for myself, too, because growing up, Jaws was like a staple in my house. So and I know LC loves Jaws. We got him some stickers yesterday too, which I think he's seen them. But yeah, so that's what we did yesterday. And there's a Civil War statue there. It was pretty cool.
It's a Civil War statue is interesting in a lot of different ways. 185 men from the vineyard fought in the American Civil War. It's they list them all by name. And if you study them, it's fascinating, because for one of the guys was born in Virginia and fought for the Union. Another guy was born in Louisiana, fought for the Union. Yep. You had one Gettysburg victim who died in the 3rd during Pickett's charge, and you had one who died in Andersonville. And what's interesting about it was on one side of it, it says dedicated to the Union soldiers.
Yeah.
The other side of it had a plaque that said dedicated by the Union soldiers to the Confederate soldiers, who was kind of like a tip of the cap to them.
Yeah.
But about 2 years ago, they took the plaque down, which is too bad. And so I took a picture and put on my Facebook page of just the blank area. But the plaque still exists. It's in a museum in town there in Edgartown. But until a couple of years ago, it was up there. There was that one, and there was a Confederate monument at, over Fort Warren, which I believe were the two furthest north Confederate anythings on statues, but they're both gone now, which is too bad. But I
don't really understand why they took those ones down, because I mean, first of all, the one in the vineyard was put in place by Union soldiers.
Yeah.
It's like, so now you're not honoring their wishes. But the other one on Fort Warren was basically, it was a historical thing where they were talking about the people who died, like the Confederates who died there, which, like, I think that's an important thing to remember, their names.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of like it's lost to history kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't forget You can't forget that. But it was fascinating because it's the only one I could think of that was put up literally by survivors of the Union. In the 1930s, they put it up. And they basically said in this, basically a tip of the cap to the guys who fought hard. That's all it always said, but it had the C word in it. And so I think it was 2000, I don't know, it was recently 1920, just 2019, that's the 20. I mean, well, they took it down. Now it's just an empty little spot, but they didn't get rid of it though, that you can go see it. It's in a museum, but actually, if you Google Martha's Vineyard Civil War Monument, there's pictures of it and you can read what it said. It's nothing inflammatory, but you know how it is nowadays. But they took it down, which is too bad, which is unfortunate. But the 185, which is fascinating for the time because the vineyard is not exactly Boston. There's not a lot of people. I'm not sure what kind of population they had at the time, but I'm going to guess that was probably almost every guy 18 to 34 on the vineyard who fought, or most of them at different times. But this area has obviously got a lot. People think of this area being mostly Revolutionary War. Sometimes you think of some of the Indian stuff. Sometimes you think of things like that. But there's a big Civil War history in Massachusetts. There really is. They definitely take pride in it, which is cool. Yeah.
Good morning, Lisa and Mike. Mike's on here from Arlington and Paul's on here too. So good morning, guys.
But it's hot in Arlington, Virginia today, like it always is. Yeah. But it's good. It's good to see the stuff, but it was definitely fun to get out there and see all that stuff, which is always fun.
It was nice. I want to go back. It was nice to make that pilgrimage kind of, I was happy to do it because my mom would have loved it.
And I had my Monocacy t-shirt on, and we actually ran into somebody on the boat who was from Frederick, Maryland.
Yep.
Who was visiting here for the weekend. So there's Civil War nerds everywhere, Mary. You just gotta know how to find them. So, but that was fun. That was a good time. So yeah, we didn't do an episode this week. We just basking in the glow of your Howard episode still, which you're still all excited about.
Yeah, which we have to thank everybody who listened to that episode. It turned out to be, we don't usually talk about, well, actually also thank you to everyone for listening, because we reached 175,000 downloads, which when we started this 3 years ago, we were like, we don't know if there's going to be a thing or if it's going to be popular.
Well, we never meant it to be a thing.
No, we didn't.
That was the thing about it. We only did it because it was something to do. It was fun. We never intended to anything. But it was good because I think, there was over like 1,000 people downloaded that Howard episode in the first 72 hours, some crazy number. And I didn't realize you've been talking. Me too. Most of you've been talking about Howard for 3 years now. So of course that was like the biggest tease ever for an episode, and having it being episode 111 was kind of fun. So but in any case, that's cool. So appreciate everybody listening to that. It's definitely a lot of fun, but it's certainly never intended to do anything. No, nor do we still plan on attaining anything more than it is. It's just a fun little thing we do, but it's pretty cool.
No, it's like we just do it because we love to tell the story of the Civil War and the people that fought. We've done a few episodes now about generals, like we've done, and we cover both sides. I know I definitely want to talk about Beauregard soon, Beauregard as we call him on here. I'm to the point in my Beauregard biography. I'm an incredibly slow reader because I'm dyslexic, so it takes me a long time to read a book. So I'm to the part where it's just before the Battle of Franklin, and Beauregard is like getting pissed off at Hood. And even I'm getting pissed off at Hood reading it, because Beauregard is telling him, okay, this is what you need to do. And then Hood doesn't even communicate that to him. He's communicating directly with Richmond, even though Beauregard is kind of, quote unquote, his direct supervisor. And anyway, they had this base of, kind of their supplies were in one place. And then Hood went so far into Tennessee that he was like, he couldn't use the base of supplies. Right. Morning, MJ. But basically, like what happened is Hood, goes to like Beauregard. First of all, Beauregard thinks his plan is nuts, like to go into Tennessee. Like he's like, why don't you just stay where you are, kind of thing. But Hood is like, no, we can go into Tennessee and get Nashville, and then I can go over and join Lee, and we can kick their asses. And Beauregard is just like, fine, whatever.
No, supply line's a big deal, and that's why when you're looking at a lot of these battles, obviously that everybody likes to make fun of Hood about wanting to go to the Rat at Gettysburg and stuff like that. But you got to remember too, you're going away from your supply line, and you're spreading yourself too thin, and that's a big deal when you're looking at just military strategy and logistics, all that stuff. It's tough to move a lot of men, especially 75,000, 80,000 men in the hills of Pennsylvania when you don't know where the hell you're going. when you're using 2020 hindsight as your benefactor. But
Mhm.
again, Nashville was the big supply depot for the Union.
Yeah.
And at the time, they're thinking as well, if we can take Nashville, maybe we'll, put a crimp in Sherman's dick as far as what he wants to do. But they didn't realize that that wasn't going to be the case. So there's a lot of that stuff. But I mean, but Beauregard was somebody who, again, we've said this a million times. He was that pitcher in the bullpen who they didn't bring out, and they lost, and they should have used. But then that's his whole deal. And he got bitter, and he didn't like his play.
He was so bitter by the end. Like, he was just like his biography basically says, like, this last thing that he, the thing that he's doing now in the book is like, he's kind of overseeing where Hood is. He's supposed to be his supervisor, but they made it so that like Hood that Beauregard could never be in charge of an army if he went to the area. Like, if he went to the area, he would be the highest ranking officer. So therefore, he should be in charge of the army when he arrives. But Davis was like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, Hood's supposed to report to you, but Hood never does. So he either did it, took it just because he didn't give a shit at that point, or he was like, I will take anything at this point to make it feel like I'm doing something. But really, he wasn't doing anything at all.
No, he really was underutilized. And again, we talked a lot about people rip on Lew Wallace for Shiloh, but the guy who really got ripped was Beauregard.
Big time. But I mean, and he had to constantly be on the defensive. He's like, I had to take the men from Corinth because they were so sick. Like, the water was poisoned. Oh, by the way, Frank said that he got the Abner Small book on your recommendation.
Very good. The Road to Richmond, I've said it before, it's in my opinion anyway, it's the best firsthand account in the American Civil War by a soldier. And it's a fascinating read because he's someone who he's very opinionated, and he speaks his opinion very openly.
Yeah.
Speaking of Howard, he didn't like Howard. He bashed Howard every chance he could, but he really gives you that book. And the book is not easy to find. And if you do find it, I bet you it's expensive, even paperbacks. I don't think they make anymore, but it's still around. But it gives you such a good idea of what they were talking about. Originally he was from the 3rd Maine. Under Howard. He eventually ends up at the 16th Maine under Charles Tilden. But his account of the first day at Gettysburg is a fantastic read because he talks about, being, where Doubleday Avenue is up in that area now. And he talks about being at the salient with Tilden. And he kind of personally debunks the thought of, well, they should have done this, they should have done that, because he basically says no one knew shit except where we were fighting. And he really gives some really good personal insight into that. And it's tough to read that book without coming out for a real appreciation of Charles Tilden and what those 16th Maine guys did, because some of those 16th Maine guys ended up on Round Top the next day. The ones who survived. Out of the 300 people who fought for the 16th Maine, something like 35 made it back to Cemetery Hill, and their reward was jumping on the guy with the mustache's train to go sit up there on a hill. Too bad it wasn't done now, the battle, because they couldn't have gone up there, Mary. It's closed. So that would have been
rehabilitation, and some people are getting very upset about that. And it's like
that whole fiasco was unbelievable.
Frank also said, before I start listening to this podcast, I really didn't know Howard, but since 2020, I've learned about so many figures of the war. That's very cool. Thank you.
Lucky you, Frank. Lucky you. No, he's a fascinating study.
We got to hang out with Frank.
Frank. We met Frank when we did Hessler's Walk there, and I remember he was totally dressed, and I was like, how are you not sweating? But because I think he had a hoodie on, he had the whole
but it was like pants. This breathable material.
Yeah, I know, but still,
But no, and he was he came to everything at 4 So we hung out with him that night. So that was really cool. He came all the way from California. So it's really, Frank's like, and Frank is a Claiborne fan like I am too, which is really
cool. No, you gotta like who you like. But the thing is there's a lot of places to go in these battlefields, and we're talking about some of the anniversaries. First Bull Run, Chin Ridge. There's a bunch of cool places: Henry Hill, Matthews Hill, the Stone Bridge, the Stone House. Don't forget about the winery, Mary. But for the people who are kind of the Gettysburg focused people, and Gettysburg.
I get it about Round Top. It sucks it's closed, but they are doing it for preservation and to make it more accessible.
Oh yeah,
it'll be done soon. And I know there was somebody on. There's also someone complaining about Devil's Den and the fence that's around it. Like, they need to do that for rehabilitation. And that's
preservation.
and it's like, I knew a few people that didn't go to the 160th at Gettysburg because they're like, oh, Round Top is closed. What's the point? You have like, what is it, 60,000 acres of battlefield?
There's 6,000 acres of
Yeah,
Gettysburg,
yeah, 6,000.
but the thing about it is, there's all these battlefields. Our friend Jen posted a picture from Antietam last night, and so there's places to go and go see all the stuff, and we're lucky that a lot of these battlefields are preserved, and if you've gone out to the Western Theater, you realize that there are some beautiful ones, but there are also a lot of the ones here and there who just don't exist anymore, and it's going to come a point when if you don't visit these places and no one goes, and admittedly. You and I, and when I've gone in places by myself, I've been to battlefields like Spotsylvania, and I've been the only one there.
Yeah.
Right. And there comes a point when sustainability is not going to be easy. So go out there and visit them, because not that there's any of these are impending doom or anything, but if people stop going, there's less of an interest. A couple more generations go by, the Civil War gets further and further back. And I sit here in Massachusetts and realize that except for maybe Concord, there's not a lot of stuff that exists anymore. Is monuments and stuff like that. Bunker Hill isn't even on Bunker Hill. The monument's on the wrong hill. It's on Breed's Hill, but where the battle was. But the thing about it is if you don't go and visit them now, the incentive for future generations. That's why I like seeing the pictures online, like what Gettysburg Foundation does, or even BOF does, of kids on the battlefields with their parents. And I know people get all worked up because they're wearing, their little hats and their little swords, and people think they're disrespecting, blah, blah, blah.
It's not though. Like
I know. Like, I mean, but they're
terrible.
There are people ripping the Barbie movie, Mary. And Margot, how the hell do you rip that movie when she's in it, right? But the thing is people are going to get pissed what they're going to get pissed about.
Yeah.
But I love seeing the kids at the battlefields because it's good. I saw one time I was sitting there doing one of the picket charge walks, and there was a father and a kid walking across the field, and the father's pointing the stuff out, and the kids looking. He's probably like 6 or 7. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. It's just because it's that next generation. Because us old people, Mary, aren't going to be doing this forever. Especially the way you drink. You're lucky another year out of you.
Oh God.
Yeah, how was your morning?
Hey, it is my birthday next month, August 10th.
Celebrate now, I guess. Might as well get
41.
Going. But definitely, enjoy the stuff though. It's awesome because it's I remember, I think a lot of people have taken that picture at the sniper's nest, the sharpshooter's nest at Gettysburg, and even our friend Gary Edelman's done it. I don't think anybody's called him disrespectful.
No.
Right, it's just whatever. Do you do you.
No.
But I guess although I don't agree with climbing on freaking monuments. I don't go crazy. I'm just saying that I think enjoy it while bask in it, enjoy it. There should be, in my opinion, of course, I'm a capital N nerd. There's no greater feeling for me as when you walk on that battlefield. It's a joy overcomes you.
Yep.
And if me being happy to be walking a battlefield, people died is somehow disrespectful. I don't give a shit, to be honest. I love it. So
Mike said nothing helps you understand a battle like having a guided tour in the actual battleground. That's very true. Like going and visiting these places is important. And yes, if you visit them, you can be a historian. Well,
I mean, the thing you got to do it for the right reasons, though. I mean, again, it's the people who any good historian, whether you are a PhD or whether you're someone who's just starting or just researched and just enjoys it, whatever. It's going out and telling the stories of the people who actually did the work. It's not about trying to bask yourself in any kind of glory because you're talking about them. That's the stupidest thing in the world. But there are a lot of good stories to be told. Frank mentions Howard. Howard's a major general. He's somebody who's probably an A-lister in the Civil War world. But again, he's not a household name to the average person.
No,
but it's
he's
great
not like a Chamberlain. But it's interesting that and I wish I'd mentioned this in the episode, and I wish I did, is that when Howard died in 1909, he was the last Civil War veteran to die that commanded a Union army. So you think about it, today's the anniversary of Grant's death. Grant commanded an army. And then, who else is there? There's George Henry Thomas. There's Meade. There's all like Hooker. They are all gone. And Howard is the last one. And he's the last one for a few years. And I often wonder how that made him feel. Like if he realized, like, holy shit, I am the last. I'm the last one.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. the thing about Oliver Otis Howard, to me anyway, and you know, you certainly know way more than I do about Howard. He didn't seem to be the type of guy who really relished, you know, nothing against Chamberlain, but Chamberlain loved being Joshua Chamberlain.
Oh yeah.
And there's no shame in that, but it's just the way it was. Howard doesn't strike me as the guy who, I mean, I could be wrong, who really went around and promoted himself the way that some of these other guys. I think he was more somewhat discreet.
He loved telling the stories. Like, he lectured and he got paid for those lectures. I'm just Gentile mentions that the ghost stuff doesn't bother him and it's a gateway to history. And
it shouldn't bother you. And look, and we have friends who hate the ghost, whatever. Okay. Yeah. And that's fine. And I know, look, you can, whether you believe in the ghost, whether you don't believe in the ghost, it doesn't matter. Like I said, you do you. But at the end of the day, if you're a kid and you go to a ghost tour and you find out the story of Jeremy at the Farnsworth house, or you find out the story of Sachs Bridge, you find out the story of Devil's Den with the Texas soldier from the first Texas. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. But if it helps you kind of expand your knowledge and kind of give you that thirst, that spark, then I'm all for it. I mean, that's the thing. And people, the problem, Mary, with social media is people get butthurt over the stupidest things now.
Yes.
And they like to be confrontational. They'd like to be whatever. But I'll tell you right now, as someone who owns a house in the town of Gettysburg who pays taxes with no kids in the town schools, I appreciate the fact that this is income going into the town to keep the taxes down. Yep. The taxes, if you live in Gettysburg, you know the taxes are not cheap to have a house. It's not. But 51% of that town is tax exempt. Yeah. And in fact, the churches, the battlefield, the museums. So anything that brings the money to that town, personally, I'm all for it. And if you're into the town and you want the town to remain vibrant, you better hold for it. Because I'll tell you right now, go to Antietam. Right now, there's probably nobody there. And it's nothing against Antietam. It's because you've got no hotels, you've got one restaurant, so you got one ice cream place, and there's no shame in that. But if you want the town to remain vibrant, you have to look for different economic sources to bring people in. And if the ghost thing is what does it, okay, so be it. You know.
Yeah, Lynn says absolutely love the phrase butthurt. It's so true.
It's true though.
I mean, and AQ mentions hating Gettysburg ghosts is like hating Salem witches. Exactly. And we've had to say to a few people, like, you know what, don't hate on Salem, especially if you've never visited it.
Salem is an interesting place because, you know, I've read on, I know this is going to surprise you, Mary, but sometimes there's this thing called Twitter. People run their mouths, have no idea what they're talking about. And Salem's a great place. People seem to think that it's some sort of witch Disney World or something like that. People dress up. They go, you know, Civil War people that, you know, that are on there will be like, well, it's disrespectful to history because people dress up as witches. I'm like, you know something? I wore a Union uniform at Gettysburg a few weeks ago. I don't think I was disrespecting anybody. It's the same friggin' thing.
Yeah. Well, considering one of the, like, you know, there was someone that was saying that, and then they had their kid dressed up in like one of those kepi hats at Gettysburg. It's like, which is it? You know, like,
no, I think whatever floats your boat, you float. No one really should give a shit personally, but I will say there are ways to do things, a way not to do things. But again, don't judge if somebody who is like, hey, I'm going to the Farnsworth Ghost Tour, I'm going to go see Mark Nesbitt. He's going to do his tour down at the Grove. Okay, fine. So if you don't like it, don't do it.
Yeah, but don't judge anybody who dies. And that's the terrible thing, is like we all get into this a different way. Like Lynn says, the Salem Museum is so interesting. We didn't get to
Salem. If you haven't been to Salem is awesome. A friend of ours' daughter is actually in Salem this weekend, someone who we're going to be drinking with later this afternoon. And so there are a lot of things to do. Now, admittedly, Halloween is a tough time to go.
Oh, it's busy, but it's like any battle anniversary, you know. Scott just said, just finished Carpenter's book on Howard. Between listening to you and the book, I have total respect for OO. That's very cool. That's awesome. That book is so good. It's a very balanced biography. He says numerous times, you know, Howard had faults. He made a mistake at Chancellorsville. One of his faults was he didn't like to be wrong. Well, he's human. Who likes to be wrong?
We can go. We talked about this in the episode a little bit, but the Chancellorsville thing, it's if you really get into it and you realize the orders that were given down. I mean, if you're a hooker and you really want to worry about that flank, and your initial order to Howard is make sure you keep your reserves close in case we need them. Yeah. And then 2 hours later, he takes away Barlow's division away from Howard. I mean, and then he gets routed and he blames Howard for not having enough men. I mean, there are little things about it. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the dude turned water into wine like you think, okay? But I will say a lot of the he said she said stuff after that battle came out to cover one's hind parts, okay? And that person would be Joseph Hooker, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. I have the book right here. So
I guess so.
by John A. Carpenter. It's a very, very good book. Very balanced. The one thing that he doesn't talk about that I didn't realize, and I found this out recently, is that Howard's wife was, for the last few years of her life, even before Howard died, she had to have a nurse. Like, she basically had to have home care come in and look after her because she was not well. It's hinted in some of his letters that menopause was very hard on her. And at the time, they didn't have the pills that they have today to help treat it. But apparently she was not, her mood was not very good when that happened. But anyway, so after Howard passes away, she actually falls and fractures her hip. So then she needs like 24/7 care, right? She unfortunately passes away just a couple years after he does in 1911, but she was only getting like $100 a month or something like that. And that was enough just to cover the nurse. So she ends up having to sell her home, and she has to go to Congress and say, like, I need more money, look after myself. And look, my husband was like a fucking army commander. Help me out with this, right? So Congress does end up, I think, giving her more of a pension. But like, that is a sad part of his story that nobody talks about.
Well, it's amazing when you look at how many of these famous Union generals and Confederate generals, doesn't matter, who died penniless. I mean, Grant's famous because he finished his memoirs, he had to write them, and then he died soon after. But you mentioned Howard, you mentioned a lot of these people. Some were lucky, some weren't. I mean, Nathan Bedford Forrest, he spent his entire personal fortune arming his men. So there's a lot of that, and it's you mentioned Wilder and all that stuff. He did get paid back. But again, a lot of these guys had to put out their own freight to do this stuff, which in today's world seems laughable. Although we still treat veterans the same way, by the way.
I know. It hasn't changed. And like, I mean, Howard was making money off the lectures, but still he has to live right. And he's not giving, they don't get, like, pension wasn't very good back then. And about, like, when he lectured about other people, which is pretty cool too. MJ said she had some guy come at her in her trivia, saying no, calling it stupid, no one learns anything, doesn't like humor to help teach history. I said, well, we know a few people like that they don't like.
Oh, there was some guy gave us shit on Twitter the other day for that, and that's fun.
Was that the toy swords and the QPs?
No, that was another idiot. But there was one guy. We posted a picture of us at the winery over at Bull Run, and he says it demeaned the soldiers who fought there. I'm like, how the fuck? Okay. So listen, the reality is, however the hell you learn, it doesn't matter. MJ does a great job with her trivia.
Oh, she does. And Lynn even said, like, she goes on there and she will look stuff up afterwards. And the internet has given so many, like, cranky, whiny people a voice. And that's exactly, like, I got rid of my personal Twitter account because I was tired of it. I'm like, this is not worth it anymore.
No.
But
it's hard. I respect the hell out of the MJs of the world. Andrea's got her Barlow thing, because when you put yourself out there, and we've seen it, especially if you're female, if you put yourself out there in this environment, you're going to open yourself up to a lot of scrutiny, and it's a shame what happened,
including from other females, which is sad.
Well, that's again, we can go on and on about that with some of these freaking people, but to put yourself out there, it's a hard thing, and so what she does, what a lot of the people do, are commendable because I know for a fact, speaking of MJ, that she puts up with way more shit than she deserves. And you do too, for that matter. But again, a lot of it is I hate to stereotype people, but a lot of it is it's an older crowd who thinks that things should be done a certain way. And I'll tell you, a lot of people don't like being told or made to think about things that maybe were wrong. We see that with McClellan a lot, right? And people definitely don't like the idea of having a woman telling them something that they don't agree with, and that's just unfortunate.
The person that we know who knows the most about McClellan is Shanna. I
Yeah, I would
think
agree
it's
with that. I would
amazing.
agree with that. And I'll tell you, MJ, she's, I was just looking at her comment. Yes, MJ, I wore a corporal uniform. You know why? Because I did that out of respect for you. I could have worn the colonel one and made you salute me, but I didn't. I wore the corporal one because I knew I had to salute
I
you. That was
saluted her every morning because
that was by design. I actually really did that for that reason. But it was cool. But everybody who teaches and does it their own way, go ahead and do it, because I'll tell you, the world would be a worse place if literally you read Coddington and that's all you did. You're going to learn a lot from people like that. But again, look at some of the people we know who do this with really outstanding personalities. Those are the ones you remember.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And like, MJ says, we aren't female historians, we are historians. Exactly.
Well, that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, unfortunately.
I hate that term. I hate the term female historians. And it's not because I'm not a feminist or whatever. It's because I don't think I need to add that into it. I'm just a historian. I'm me, and I think, I've been asked a few times, like, what's it like being a female historian? It's like, I'm so over that. If someone wants to call themselves that, that's awesome. Good for them. You do you. But for me, I'm just a historian. That's it.
Randall Cunningham was a quarterback for the Eagles a long time ago. He was a black quarterback. I remember someone in the media asked him, how long have you been a black quarterback? And he started laughing. He's been black my whole life. But it's the same concept.
Yeah.
He with this, I mean, again, that's fine, whatever. But people like that, and the phrase historian is another one that gets people all ruffled. And
they say like you need a PhD. No, you don't. That's a professional historian. There's also public historians who do not have PhD.
Maybe if they maybe the labels are kind of just drop the freaking labels and do it. Yeah. If you don't like something, don't tune it up. But that's cool though. But I do what I do, you do what you do. Yep. Everyone does what they do. And I know from some people, specifically down at Gettysburg, that the way people do tours sometimes ruffles people the wrong way.
Yeah.
I know one guy specifically who catches shit for the way he does it. And that's unfair because he's probably somebody who people like to take tours from.
Yeah.
But that's unfortunately the byproduct of the way it is. But it's all good. It's all good. Whatever. Yeah.
MJ says, I believe a lot of it is also new research that comes out and people get upset by what may shatter their beliefs. Exactly. Like I've started doing research for my Howard book and I found out some stuff that's never been published before. And it's quite interesting, and maybe it'll change the way that he's viewed as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the McClellan book that just came out. You mentioned Shanna. We talked to her about that at Gettysburg. There's a lot, and there could be more stuff. You got to realize when you're looking at straight Civil War history, for one, it's not that long ago, and two, it's just scratching the surface of the stuff that's out there. And because a lot of the things like George Thomas's letters were destroyed, and a lot of people didn't write letters. Not everybody was as verbose as Chamberlain or Longstreet or Grant or any of these people. So you're always going to have that gray area.
Yeah.
But that's the problem that I've always thought this for years, was people take the gray area of the world, the Stephen Searses of the world, the Earl J. Hesses of the world, and take that as gospel and realize that they're putting a lot of opinion into their book.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're basing it sometimes off of one thing they've read, which is what Sears.
And really, you mentioned McClellan. It wasn't really until Tom Clemens came around. He, a historian, he really shined a lot of light on the Lost Order 191. And it went in the face of Hess and especially Stephen Sears.
Yeah.
So it's kind of created a different look at him now.
Yeah.
And so there's that Pavlovian Mac bad, this guy good. And so it's created more of a deeper dive into it now to study. And like I said before, and Frank mentions the Howard thing. Yeah, a lot of people, myself included, didn't know a hell of a lot about it. I knew who he was, but until you came along. And really it kind of forced people by their thumbs dragged in to study a person like him.
Yep.
And he's a fascinating character, and this certainly is. And
he's not like, yes, he's Christian, he's religious, but he's not without a sense of humor. You can see it in his letters, you can see it in his memoirs, that the guy had, he was probably pretty quiet, but then he could probably drop these amazing one-liners that would get everybody laughing, right? And like, he recounts different stories in his memoirs, about one of my favorite, two of my favorites are the one with the woman that comes in and is like, basically telling that he treated her not very well, and he does, like, she's telling Sherman. But the other one is when Kilpatrick and Sherman and Howard are standing around, and Slocum's there too, and they're having this conversation, and Kilpatrick's like, well, how do you want me to tell you I'm in that area? And Sherman just looks at him and says, well, burn a bridge or something.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a
Which is
different world. Well,
hilarious.
it's great advice. Think about it. If you do it today, go ahead and burn something. But I mean, it's fun when you research and you discover new stuff and you study new stuff. There's so many cool aspects of it. Call something a cool aspect is not disrespect the soldiers. It just means there's something about it that oh, you don't even hide those yawns anymore. You don't even hide it.
Sorry.
Wow. But that's the thing is you study these people and and you can look at someone and you can study a Hancock closely, but also realize there are some flaws there.
Yeah.
And that's part of being a well-rounded person, obviously. This is not news by any stretch of imagination. It's just reality.
Yeah.
But that's how it is. You too many people hold on to some of these dudes like it's their favorite sports team, you know. But it's one of those things where you have to keep an open mind. It's no question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like MJ mentions, the last Cushman book came out 20 years ago, and the author got upset. I debunked a lot of it with new research and sources. Maybe I'll debunk some of the stuff that Carpenter says in his book. Maybe I'll agree with it, But MJ says instead of getting upset, people should be welcoming newer things. And she loves finding new stuff. And that's what's cool about this is you find out stuff like, I found out the story about Howard's, his wife.
Yeah.
And also finding out too, now this is in Carpenter's book, but that I had no idea his last public appearance was in Canada, an hour from my hometown. Like that is just so interesting.
That was London, right?
Yeah, London, Ontario.
Not far from Lucan.
Exactly, where we had beers.
The great Lucan, Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of this stuff, and you can really get into. It's funny when you study we know people who are really into Chamberlain. A lot of it comes from the movie, and it's justifiably so because he did a lot of great things. But when you really get into studying guys like Ellis Spear, guys like that, there's Melcher, the flag bearer at Gettysburg. Yeah. There's a lot of different variations to the story about some of these things. But to give him credit, he wanted to tell his story. He felt he knew it was going to be important at the time. And if it wasn't for Michael Shower, people still wouldn't realize. Yeah. People wouldn't think that Gouverneur K. Warren statue on Round Top is Warren. I mean, is Chamberlain, because a lot of people do every single time, every time I go up there. But yeah, sometimes you got to tell the story. He was wise enough to know that that he had an opportunity to help his career with the Civil War. There's no shame in it. I mean, obviously Grant did it in real time. We talk about that a million times.
Yeah, based on like his memoirs are, and it's Mark Twain who's telling him, write your memoirs. But Grant still died. Like he was poor when he died. I think one of the richest ones was Sherman. Sherman had tons of money.
No, he did. He invested wisely.
Yeah, he did investments, and he just, I think he got paid a lot when he went somewhere too, because it's Sherman.
Yeah.
And veterans from the March to the Sea would come along and, knock on his door and say, like, I've fallen in hard times. Can you help me out? And Uncle Billy, and he always did. And that was the thing, is he becomes this kind of like, Sherman is like this uncle figure, this father figure. And a lot of men viewed him that way, including Howard. Howard viewed him as a father, kind of this older brother, father figure. And Howard's the oldest of, all his siblings. I think he just has brothers, Charles and Roland, and I think there's another.
Yeah, and they were with him at his side almost everywhere he went in the Civil War. I mean, Charles was at the famous Moritz Tavern meeting on the 30th.
Was he really? Oh, wow.
He was there with him. Now, he doesn't mention whether Captain Dickinson was with him there at the time, who delivered the Pipe Creek letters to Reynolds. And whether he took the letters and read them and stuck them in his back pocket and never read them, but that's the $1 million question about that whole thing. But he was there, and obviously Roland was there, and he was very religious and stuff like that with these guys. And but no, that's the thing is it was forget just
so
Tom
there's
Chamberlain.
There's another person, Charles Howard, that knew what was said in that meeting. Then
yeah. And they didn't talk about it. Nope. They cleared their history cache, Mary, like any wise person will do. But that's the reality of it. And so he's there and hearing these stories. And the only thing that came out of that meeting was that Reynolds seemed very depressed about it. So we'll never know what the hell that meant. So we'll never know. But whatever happened in that meeting, if there was a fly on the wall, people always talk about, oh, I would have loved to have been at the Trossel barn when Meade rode up and what he told Sickles and ripped him in half and blah, blah, blah. The place you want to be is that Murrett's Tavern, because that if somebody found an actual firsthand primary source of the meeting, the dictation of that meeting, that would open up so many. It would answer so much about the Battle of Gettysburg, about why Reynolds fought there, why he didn't fall back in that, that advance he was supposed to fall back to the 11th and eventually back to Piper. Why Doubleday felt that he was told, it was his understanding was that they were going to defend the city street by street. But that's the thing. Those are the cool things that are missing to history. And what are we going to do? You got to fill those gray areas in on a hypothesis, an educated opinion, to make the determination, right?
Yeah. So AQ said Charles Howard, in one account, at least, is who helped Arabella cross Confederate lines to get to my poor Barlow.
Yeah, and that's a story about that. There's a lot of truth and a lot of conjecture about the Arabella to Barlow story, but it's cool because by all accounts, it really happened. It really happened. So, and these are those valor moments that happened, and everyone talks about the Gordon Barlow thing and stuff like that. But there's a lot of cool things about that. That they're just. And this is again speaking just specific to Gettysburg, but it happens in all these battles. You talk about the Battle of Fredericksburg, where there was a Confederate officer who was killed on the Union side of the river. And they stopped fighting to return the body back, and they had like a salute to this fallen Confederate officer. Little things like that. If the Freemasons exist, Mary, if they did, there'd probably be a lot of good stories about funerals and stuff that happened on the battlefield that really did happen.
Well, look at Lytle at Chickamauga.
Yeah, and admittedly, the most overblown one is the Armistead Bingham thing, because that didn't happen the way people think it did. But there's a lot of other ones. There's a whole bunch of other ones. So. But those human stories, those personal stories, the ones that are so invaluable, and why those diaries like Abner Small's diary is so important. And there's no shame in any of the books that anybody writes since then. But the sweet spot are those diaries. And you have to understand, and people sit there and say, well, Mary Chesnut's diary is a bunch of horseshit because it's not true. No, but that's how she felt at the time. That's her person. And a lot of the Abner Small stuff is probably not true, but it's how they perceived it at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way it is. So,
exactly.
So I gotta read them.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to. And all the memoirs, don't just read Grant's. Grant's are amazing memoirs. But if you read it, you're only getting one part of the story, and some parts of it are not true, like Missionary Ridge Non-Victory. And I mean, I do like and respect Hooker, and I think he gets pretty shitty treatment by Grant over Lookout Mountain. But I mean, Hooker did it to himself too. George Henry Thomas, wish we had his papers, because getting his perspective on things would have been really, really interesting. And I think I was talking to somebody about, they were like, well, maybe if Grant had went to Sherman and talked to him about Thomas, Grant might have respected Thomas more. Well, that's not true, because Sherman didn't respect Thomas very much either. They were roommates at West Point. But after the Civil War, when Thomas, he's a Virginian, he fights for the Union, he's never trusted, And even Lincoln said that, he couldn't have the front cover on Harper's Weekly because.
No, there's a lot of personal animosity with these guys. But again, these people are all, they're people just like today. I mean, you think of today's modern day politics, people think it's never been more divisive. Well,
it is.
I mean, there was. Yeah. We're gonna talk. Our next episode is gonna be about the New York City draft riots. Okay, that took place, and if you want to really get into, and we've talked about this before, and we'll talk about this then. But those draft riots, Monday, July 13th, 1863. It's right after Gettysburg, and Lincoln's going to have this draft, kind of like an NFL lottery, and you had a lot of the Irish who were angry at emancipation because they didn't want the blacks competing for jobs. And you had the $300 per person exemption. And New York City, Fernando Wood, that fun lover, was the mayor. And he was someone who did not like the idea of of what was going on in the country. You mentioned the Copperheads, right?
Yep.
So you have this first day of the 13th, nothing really happens. The 14th, you've got these gangs.
Yeah.
And the funny part about it was when you really get into the stories of the riots, a lot of the gangs were the firemen in town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so it ends up being these stories of these Irish people hunting down Black men in the town, blaming them for their problems. And you have horrible stories of lynchings, babies being thrown off windows, all this shit. In New York City, still divided today as far as the boroughs based on these draft rights. But what the draft does do, what this draft right does kind of say, we'll talk about this in the episode. It really, for the people who think North good, South bad people, as far as how they dealt with the African Americans, this story is a different one because it really shows that the bigotry,
the animosity was there in the North
everywhere.
Too. Yeah, it's not. That's what I hate about, like, you see on social media just all this stuff about the Confederates are so evil and blah blah blah. And yes, their cause is terrible. They are fighting to uphold.
No, but what people are going to realize,
they're really bad in the North too.
No, but the animosity and the hatred was not a Southern versus Union thing. Yeah. Look, there's people with their ignorance everywhere. There just are. But back then, it was a bad situation, and New York City actually wanted to secede from the Union. New York City. I don't know how they would have had the Yankees name for the baseball team if they seceded. I don't know how that would have worked, but that's the reality though. And so it paints an interesting picture of those 4 days were some of the most brutal days in American history. And it's not really studied. You had churches burned, you had orphanages routed. They were hunting African Americans in the town to lynch them publicly because of what was going on in the Civil War. And we're going to talk about it, and it's a really ugly part of it. The movie Gangs of New York, if you've seen that movie, I know you have. The last scene of the movie is about those riots, and it talks a lot about that bubbling hatred that was going on in a city like that. And it wasn't specific just to New York. That just happens to be where the draft riot. But I mean, it was everywhere. It was here in Boston. It was Chicago. You name it. But it's something that you got to look at. This was although it was a civil war, they say, but it was really a sectional war. But you had counties and pockets here in the North who didn't care about the Civil War, didn't care about slavery one way or the other. Just like you had places in the South, Free State of Jones famously, where the Confederates had to go around some of these counties because they were pro-union. So yes, it's an ugly part of American history that we'll talk about, but it's a must learn. It really is, because you like anything else, when you study the past, you learn more about the present. You find out like how Harlem, a traditional Black neighborhood in New York, was created specifically because it drove these Blacks out of Manhattan to that section of the island because of these draft riots. And it's still set today. So it's an interesting talk. It'll be definitely kind of a downer of an episode because it's not the easiest thing to talk about. And you had this population boom in New York City in the 1800s that kind of was a perfect storm of bubbling hatred. And this is, look, I love to rip on New York, don't get me wrong, but it was nothing specific to them. It was just the way the whole thing was kind of coming together. And the draft riots and having the ability to pay $300 to get out of it did not sit well with the Irish in that town, who were being forced to fight, who didn't have the money to be able to get out of the draft. And they saw Black people being freed, taking their jobs, and it just led to a lot of bad shit. So we'll record that episode, I think, Thursday, but definitely check that one out. But if not, definitely at least read into it, because it's basically called like an Irish Civil War is really what it was in the city of New York.
So Jaron mentions, he said, I hope you elaborate on the New York City secession movement. I've heard of it, but don't know the details.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that. But really what you had was you had Copperheads, and you had a mayor named Fernando Wood, who's in the movie movie Lincoln. And he famously talks about King Abraham Africanus the First, right? But like a lot of folks in Maine, they didn't feel that their men should fight for a cause that they didn't care about. Now, it was mostly economic, because New York City was a big area who took a lot of the Southern cotton. And so the Civil War was affecting their purses too. So if you have these people, if you have a lot of people who are Irish, people like Fernando Wood and the Democrats were courting for
Yeah.
votes, you were sitting there, you were almost a Confederate city at the time economically, and you wanted the Irish to vote for you, the
Yeah.
ones who could vote. And the way you do that was stoking the flames and
Yeah.
saying the U.S. shouldn't be in the war. It made no economic sense for New York City to be in the Civil War because that killed them. It killed Maine. Maine was another place. The movie Copperhead takes place in Maine because a lot of their seafood that was being sold to the South was being sold to Southern plantations.
Yeah.
Ironically, lobster was something that was given to the slaves in the South because it was cheap at the time, and it was a way to get rid of that. So, but it's definitely, we'll talk a lot about that. But it's an interesting part of that city's history. New York, the state of New York had the most Civil War soldiers, the Battle of Gettysburg by far. But the New York City was a pocket where it was not as embraced as it was not an abolitionist city in a lot of cases.
No.
And that's not a shot against New York. It's just the reality. It was because of the economics.
Yeah. MJ mentions Town Line, New York is a small town in New York State near the Canadian border that voted to secede and join the Confederates.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting a lot of the Southern cotton in New York City, a lot of those mills up there.
Yeah.
You're
the movie Copperhead addresses it.
Right. So it was very similar to Kentucky, who didn't want to secede because they dealt with a lot of business with Ohio.
Yeah.
Because the Ohio River is right there. So how in the world are you going to take a stance on a philosophical deal when you're cutting yourself off? It's like quitting your job out of spite. Yeah. In a lot of ways. In New York City was a big economic, as far as cotton goes, they sold a lot of the stuff nationally and internationally. So economically, it didn't make sense. So if you're the town fathers, you're Fernando Wood, you don't like it, obviously. So what do? You stoke the flames of the Irish, saying they're going to take your jobs out of you free. So that's where it kind of all goes. It all goes back to economics, any of these things. But it's a fascinating study, the draft riots, because you had the Sixth Corps have to come from Gettysburg because they weren't bruised like a lot of the other ones, like the third or the second to the first. So they had to go. You had soldiers firing canister at first, blanks at these firemen, and finally they were being shot at and they were firing back with rifles. You had the 69th New York, the Irish Brigade guys fighting against Irish men in the streets, shooting. And there wasn't a lot of deaths, but they don't really know for sure. But most of the deaths were blacks who were hunted down and lynched by Northerners in the city of New York. Yep. One of them was pulled out of his mother's house, who was praying with her. They pulled her out of the house. She's praying next to his mother. They pulled him out, hanged him in front of the mother in the street. I mean, humanity, what people do to each other is a horrible, horrible thing, but it's a story that doesn't need to be told. And you're never going to hear about it in school, no matter where you go to school, but it's a story that does have to be told. So we're going to tell that one. Hopefully
I'm looking forward to recording that, because Gangs of New York, I mean, yes, it's a movie, so take it with a grain of salt. That's what kind of sparked my interest in the draft riots, because I didn't know that much about them. Apparently the book is really good too. MJ mentions that town didn't consider itself rejoined the Union until the 1940s.
Yeah. And there's a lot of towns like that, and there's a lot of stories to be told with this, and that's why it's important to do it. And sometimes, they say the darkest parts of history shine the most light on the past. True. I think that's actually a Joshua Chamberlain quote. Yeah. But that's how you learn, is you find this stuff. And it's not anything more than just understanding that not everybody in the North was abolitionist. Not everybody in the South was a pro-slaver. Yeah. It really in this situation almost goes county by county. And the stories all need to be told, whether you like the stories or not. It's just the reality.
Yeah. And Paul mentions he's been trying to find data on Town Line for years, and no one seems to know why it's seceded, because citizens had voted for Lincoln. So it's an interesting story.
Well, again, it's all economics. Yeah. It is. And, as far as a lot of these guys like mentioned Fernando Wood, a lot of these people, as far as the plight of the slave, it wasn't as important as what it was doing economically to these cities and these towns. Lowell, Massachusetts up here was a big mill town. Mm-hmm. They lost a lot of money because of the Civil War, because of emancipation. Doesn't mean that you at the time that you have some hatred or love for the slavery movement, but it's as far as the straight
economics.
numbers go. Economics. We mentioned Kentucky, and that's that's the truth about a lot of this is people vote with their wallets.
Yeah.
And by stoking the flames of the Irish in the town, what Wood was doing was he was trying to guarantee his own power, because you're in a Republican state at the time. You're a Democratic mayor, and you see what's going on. So what do? You want to get as many people to vote for you as possible.
Yeah.
So how do you do it? By like even modern days, you find someone to blame, and that's the sad reality. So, but we'll talk about that'll be the episode next week.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be we're gonna do that one, and then we're gonna do the crater, and then what's the next one we're gonna do? Oh, for second Kernstown, right?
Yeah, we're going to do the riots. We're going to do it the crater, and then we're going to do second Kernstown. We're going to talk a little Jubal Early.
Yeah,
little Sean McCausland. We're going to talk about those guys. So there's a lot of fun stuff coming. But the good news is when you get into July, August, those months, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. You got to pick and choose stuff to talk about.
Yeah, Mike and AQ are heading off here, which I think we're going to head off here soon too, because we got things to do.
Oh, it's only 10 past 11. Yeah. Yeah, but we'll talk to you guys soon. We'll jump up here in a little bit. We'll go to 11:30. We'll give a little bit of time. Just trying to wake up a little bit here. I know you probably need some Pedialyte or something.
I need some more water, actually. I just drank all my water.
That's too bad. But there's a lot of interesting stories with this, and but again, the more you learn, the more you have those oh shit, holy crap moments. And these draft riots will unfortunately for some people. It's going to be one of them, because not a lot. Again, I've taken a lot of classes, and I can't remember anybody even addressing the New York City draft riots.
No,
it's a third rail, especially here in the North, because it goes against the popular mindset.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like Glowjam mentions, from my understanding, Bay County, Michigan at the time, approximately 1,500 white residents, nearly every able-bodied men left to fight for the North. Many of the local founders were abolitionists. So yeah, again, it goes back to how
Well, this city here in Boston, it doesn't get more abolitionists than Boston does. But again, there were people here who didn't feel. And the whole point was we were talking about Charles Tilden. He was from a town called Castine, Maine. If you know Maine, it's way up there. It's almost the same as Workshop, but so far north.
Yeah.
But it was a big, if you know Maine Maritime Academy, it's right near there, if you know the area.
Yeah.
But it was their economics. There was a boat that sank in the 1800s that lost a lot of gold. And so the state of Maine went, as a lot of this country went through kind of a depression because it lost the money.
Yeah.
So his family basically was wiped out, but they made a lot of money in the town because they were catching fish and, like I said, selling it to the south for plantations. So when the war happened, you cut off a big source of their income. Yeah. So it wasn't so much they supported slavery, even gave a shit less about slavery. It was just that they were losing a big client that they really couldn't afford. So if you're a copperhead up in Maine, is the war, is what's going on worth it? We're sending our men to fight against our own economic desires, and that was a big part about it. Doesn't mean they were racist. A lot of them at the time were, they were, but a lot of them was just based on straight numbers, straight, like Randy Moss used to say, straight cash, homie. Yeah. Right. That's what we used to say all the time. A receiver used to play here, but that's the reality. And so you got to look at this by their motivations and their of where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's the reality of it.
And my glass here is a Civil War glass. What? No, I just was looking at it.
I just watching you struggle through this. Is hilarious.
Oh God, I'm fine. But this is a glass that I found in an antique shop in Michigan, and it's for the centennial of the Civil War, and it's got the peace light on it. And it says, "Americans are united by the ties of their common destiny. The war between the states was a price paid in lives and suffering to strengthen those ties." So even the glass has come out that glass came out at a time when it was like, we're not going to talk about Confederates and Union. It's going to be the war between the states. It's just interesting,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, is that it's easy to look at those maps and see all those blue states and see all those red states and all this stuff. And but it's way more complicated than that.
Oh, it is.
I mean, it's town by town, family by family. Jeb Stuart's family, his family was divided. George Thomas's family was divided.
Oh, very much.
you had, like I mentioned before, you had two people who
John
fought.
Gibbons' family was
John
divided.
Gibbons was divided. Reynolds, he had his own history with that stuff.
Yeah.
Back when he was younger too. So it's way more, as much as we like life to be easy, cut and dry, black and white, it's really not. There's so many things that kind of get tied into this stuff. And we saw that here in this area with the Revolutionary War stuff. There are still loyalist chimneys here.
Yeah.
Of people who painted their chimneys white and black because that told people they supported supported the crown. In a lot of the old houses, they're still there. You can still see them. So if you're from Massachusetts, the Boston area, and you see a white chimney with a black top, it means that house was owned by in the Revolutionary War somebody who was pro to the crown.
Yeah.
And so you see in all wars, it's not unique to the Civil War by any stretch,
Yeah. No, exactly. No, there's some good comments in here, like Lynn said, and I think as recent immigrants from war-torn areas of Europe, they had no interest in fighting. It wasn't about slavery for them.
I mean, if you're a Union guy, you're going to realize 1 in every 4 soldiers who fought in the Union was not from here.
Yeah.
Ireland, Germany, even some Canadians of all things married.
Yeah.
But you got to think about it, what their motivations were. And, a lot of people rip on your 11th Corps there. But remember, a lot of these guys, they fought in Prussia 1848. A lot of the guys like Carl Schurz.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people here were coming here to learn how to fight, to go home. It was kind of like spring practice, spring training for a lot of these people. So they didn't care less one way or the other.
Yeah.
The Irish is a big part of Boston and a big part of New York City. A lot of them were recruited almost forced right off the bat. Yeah. To go fight.
Yeah. It shows it in Gangs of New York, which apparently is not true, but
not to the extent. Gangs of New York made it sound like you got off the boat and there's that song there where, I forget how it goes, but basically it paraphrases that I got off the boat and they handed me a musket to fight in Lincoln's War. And it wasn't that bad. But when the draft started, when everything was going down in July 1363, especially in New York City, you're an Irishman, a fireman, a merchant, whatever you were. It's hard to find jobs. And now you're suddenly finding yourself being forced to fight, give up your job, afraid that a freed African American is going to steal your job. And then you're seeing these rich whites paying $300 to get out of it. So, I mean, you're the hell with this. Yeah. In the Irish, they get the reputation of being fighters because of things like this. And you still hear it today.
Yeah, exactly. And Jim mentions in 1985, he learned about the draft riots in his high school history class.
Oh, good for your high school, Jim, because I'll be honest, I did not learn about mine in Waltham High School here in Massachusetts. And I certainly didn't learn about it in college either. I stumbled upon that later on. But it's something that doesn't tell the story positively in a lot of different ways. And you had, like I said, several people died and were just hunted down. It was like the movie. It's like the movie The Purge. In real life. I don't know if they wore cool masks or anything like that, but that's what that was. And it started weak. The second and third day were really brutal. The fourth day it kind of petered out because the U.S. Army was arriving and they were firing back on these people. And then finally they just called it a day. I think Lincoln basically said the hell with this draft thing. It's just not going to, it's just in New York, it's not going to work. But again, it puts a spotlight on a specific era in time. And like anything else, when something happens historically, you look at why it happens. And when you look at the immigration, you look at the racism, you look at the economics, you realize it was a perfect storm for this time. And why they didn't think about it, why they didn't.
MJ and Paul are heading off. So have a good day, guys.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you all soon. We'll jump up here a little bit, but I think it's like many things is you find yourself in a tough situation, and you look at the amount of damage done. They burned Horace Greeley's house down. Things like that. They destroyed an orphanage because it was basically black kids,
African American orphanage.
So we'll talk about that, not to give away the whole thing, but again, it's something that's an interesting thing, and people even to this day don't know how many people, because there were people literally these African American dudes who were drowned in the East River, thrown in the river. They just disappeared. They have no idea the numbers like anything else. And so, yeah, not to be too much of a downer here on a Sunday morning, but it's a part of history that needs to be told, and I haven't seen it really told anywhere, to be honest. So.
No, I'm looking forward to talking about it and learning more about it. And I am going to look because there's some really great resources for Howard, as I discovered doing this episode. And huge thank you to her name's Rachel at LMU, Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. She sent us I asked her to scan some documents for me, and she got them to me. And it was, one of them was like the funeral bill, or not funeral bill, but the funeral program for Howard's funeral. And she actually had to put in it, she's like, please excuse some of the language in this because it's for the time. And it's got some kind of what we would consider today, like not politically correct language in it. And then she sent me the newspaper article about Howard's widow. But the other thing she sent us too was a picture I'd never seen before of Howard. Taken in 1909 at a photo studio here in Boston, which, as we discovered, is now a McDonald's.
Yep, it's a McDonald's right across on Boston Common. It's almost exactly across the street from the new MLK statue there. But right across there's a McDonald's, and that was a photo studio.
Oh, sorry, it was taken in 1900, probably for his 70th birthday.
It was, and it was ironically the guy who owned his last name was also Howard, but it was no really. We can't by all accounts we can't find a relation, so that he's probably not related. But yeah, so if you go to the McDonald's on Tremont Street, that's where all of Otis Howard got his pitch taken. So you can go in there and you can let everybody know, and I'm sure they'll know all about it if you talk to the staff.
Yeah, sure. Did you know Howard had his picture taken here?
It's just cool. It's cool about some of these things.
It was cool, and I never had seen that picture published before anywhere.
No, that's what's neat about this stuff is you realize how much more stuff is out there.
Yeah.
It's funny. Howard is a guy who was photographed a lot more than people think he was. And a lot of these people maybe had one picture.
Yeah.
I think of Hancock even. There's only been a handful of pictures I've seen of old Winnie Boy. But there's probably a ton. If you go, too bad MJ jumped off. There was a thing called the Hancock Society out of Norristown, Pennsylvania, his hometown. I think she said she was part of it, but I think COVID killed it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I bet you they have a lot of photographs and a lot of stuff about Howard. I mean, about Hancock. But that's the thing is when you research some of these places, and you did all that awesome research at LMU, and that Rachel chick sent you that stuff. And then Bowdoin has a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, we went to Leeds, Maine. We went to go up there for a little research junket. There was nothing.
No. Nothing in his hometown except for the statue that he and his brother put up on that hill.
Yeah, and there's not. And it's people go up there to see the view of the mountain, but no one goes up there to go see the statue. That's unfortunate about it. But these people have more stuff. There's more legacy left behind, waiting to be found. Is the moral of the story. And I love the fact that every so often more stuff gets found.
Yeah,
little things here and there. I love the fact that Robert Gould Shaw's sword was found in an attic in Boston just a couple of years ago. Things like that. And you wonder, it's just fascinating to think. And you sit there like when I'm at home alone and the lights go out sometimes and power goes out. What I think about, it's this stuff is what else is available.
Yeah.
People
what
find
else is out there? Yeah. The LMU collection is amazing. So is the one at Howard University, and so is the one at
well, there's still Dunlop broadsheets that get found, broadsides that are found on the back of photographs, and Declaration of Independence copies that are found in back frames that are worth a fortune. And every so often they pop up, and it's like, my God, someday we need to go to an antique shop and just buy old stuff just to see if there's anything.
Oh yeah.
Little
Frank,
old books. Sorry.
Frank mentions that he and I talked at Fourscore about an alternate history book where the South wins in 1864 and Claiborne survives, and it's called Shattered Nation by Jeffrey Brooks.
There's other books like that. There's a book like The Confederacy Had Won. It has a picture of the White House, the Confederate flag. I remember the title. This is going back years and years ago now. But no, there are definitely things about that. I mean, the Confederacy had won. It'd be at least three countries. This country would be like Europe today. You'd have the North, you'd have the South, you'd have the West. They'd probably be their own country now.
Yeah.
And who knows? How does that affect World War I, World War II? If maybe the South doesn't want to fight against the Germans, maybe they align with them. It's amazing to think about the history, how things could have been different, and how important and impactful the North winning in keeping the Union together was as far as the big picture of world history. Don't forget, too, there was a monarchical system at the time, and all these kings and queens are rubbing their hands together, praying the South is going to win because it's going to prove that democratic system. What does it do? It leads to civil war and death and violence. stay with the crown. We take care of you. Obviously, it ended up being flawed.
Yeah.
But most of the 20th century was wars fought over what was going to replace the monarchy. They
Yeah.
all were, for the most part.
Yeah.
So the Civil War was a big step in that direction, because if the South had won, who knows how that affects going forward, how world history would be.
Yeah.
That's why it's an international thing, not
Yeah.
just a northern southern thing. That's why it's important to study.
Yeah, and Frank mentions that the book has some lost cause themes, obviously, but overall it's great. And Claiborne helps win the Battle of Atlanta.
Mhm.
Anniversary of that was yesterday.
Yeah, it was.
So in a few
Yeah.
days, it's the anniversary of OO taking over the Army of the Tennessee and of McPherson getting killed too.
Yeah, there's obviously a whole bunch of stuff going on, and as much as we like to talk about 1863, those 64 and early 65, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and that vice gets tightened and tightened and tightened, and the death counts go up and up and up. And we've said before, once Atlanta fell, that was the mortal wound for the Confederacy in a lot of different ways. When you look back on it at the time, of course, they don't see it that way, but that's why battles of Franklin make no sense. That's why
I know Franklin is just, and I find myself, like I said, reading the Beauregard book, getting very annoyed and angry with Hood for just, even Beauregard is telling him this is stupid. Like, don't do
No, well, the politicians didn't know the parade to pass them by. A lot of the generals did. We mentioned before that famous Edward Orr, James Longstreet proposed meeting they were going to have in Petersburg. Well, they were going to get together and they're going to trade baseball cards and they were going to call it a day. They're going to say, let's create a peace deal right now.
Yeah.
And they were going to use that friendship that Longstreet and Grant had, which is a really big thing and to their advantage in Lincoln and Stanton, and they wanted no part of it. The quote was, "You guys are soldiers, not politicians. Go ahead and fight." Same thing bit Sherman in the ass when he tried to make that peace deal at Bentonville.
Yep.
When he's like, "Well, we're going to offer these terms," they said, "The hell you are." Kind of like Gentilly with the Vienna Lager.
The fuck
right?
you are.
Fuck you. And that led to more, and that's why it goes on and on and on, where these politicians, they help prolong things. And Jefferson Davis was a big part of it too.
Yeah.
He's a Kevin Bacon in Animal House saying all is well while he's taken off. And but he was afraid for his own skin, as he should have been, to be honest.
Oh yeah. Have a great day, Ski. Ski's jumping off too.
Ski, we'll talk soon. We will catch up with you soon. So anyway, we can jump off whenever you want. I know you're having a tough time right now.
No, I'm fine. I just need some more water. I'm very thirsty.
I had coffee by myself this morning because somebody had a rag on her head and wouldn't get out of bed. Someone had too much loudmouth soup last night.
Oh God. Anyways.
Sometimes you got to know when to throw the third base coach up and stop the runner.
Anyway. Yesterday was fun. But yeah, this has been great coming on here. We really, just again, thank you to everybody for all your support for nearly 3 years of doing this podcast. It'll be 3 years in August. Actually, August the 22nd is
that the date?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
I think it's August 22nd, something like that, or August 28th or something. I think it might actually be August 28th, my brother's birthday.
I remember
which I bought him that amazing shirt yesterday.
That's right. I was sitting on the deck at the Inn at Cemetery Hill when we decided to do this thing, and called the Civil War Breakfast Club.
Just thank you to everybody that has supported us for over 175,000 downloads, but just the roundtable, which we are going to be doing that again soon. The book clubs, which we're going to be announcing dates for that soon too. Which one of them is going to be Maine at Gettysburg, and then the other one is Claiborne's biography by Simmons, and then the final one for the year is going to be Lisa Sammy's new poetry book. So, but yeah, just thank you to everybody, and also for coming on this silly little thing we do on weekends too.
Definitely is. Oh, hey Bob, what's going on? You mentioned Jefferson Davis, born in Charlotte. When he found out Lincoln was shot, if you go to Charlotte, there's actually on the sidewalk, and he knows this, but people who aren't, maybe not, there's a thing on the sidewalk that says exactly where Jefferson Davis was when he found out Lincoln had been assassinated. I took a picture of that a couple of years ago. I was there for the football game, but yeah, there's not a lot of Civil War in Charlotte, really. The cemetery has some statues and stuff, but that thing's pretty cool. You go and walk in. Who actually found the monument was our friend Roger Merriam.
Yeah.
Lisa Sammy's good friend, Gettysburg.
God.
No, we were walking around looking for it, and he stumbled upon it. It was covered with leaves at the time because it was fall, and so we noticed it. We swept it up and took a picture with it. So
That's really cool. Jim Miller said thank you for everything you do, and yeah, thank you, Jim. Jim has like been. I mean, everybody's been with us for a long time, but Jim has been like. I mean, Jim and I have been friends for I don't know how long. Jim and I.
Yeah,
have been
Jim's
friends
an
for
OG.
years.
He's part of the original.
Yeah, never met in person. But yeah, Jim and I have been friends for I don't know, like 6-7 years.
Nah,
now.
Jim's a great guy.
He's a cool guy.
And
He's got his little sign.
He has his little sign. He has his
Little
Twitter
fucker
thing. He does his little journal. He does, which is really really cool.
And it's hilarious. Like we'll be talking about books on the round table, and Jim's like, "Wait, I have that right here," and he magically reaches for it.
Oh, he's like the MacGyver of those lives. He's posted really a book on so and so written about the German soldiers in Prussian County who fought in Second Bull Run, and
I have that right here.
Who happened to be Sagittariuses. I happen to have that book right here. It's not even staged. It's the funniest part about it. It's just like, oh God, it's pretty cool.
No, when we go out his way, we're gonna go. We were gonna hang out at Chickamauga with him, but then it's twice now. Jim and I have been trying to make plans to hang at Chickamauga, and like the weather always like.
I was admittedly looking forward to that because I wanted to feel tall. And I know
he's my height.
I know he's small, so I could have felt like one of the Celtics walking around with you guys. I've always wanted to be tall, but that would have been fun. But no, we'll definitely catch up. We'll go back there and hang out and go see him again. So
anybody like Jim has a great Twitter account. But he says, "LO, I'm not quite that bad at Russian Civil War soldiers who are Sagittariuses."
It's like, really? I happen to have that book, and he holds it right up.
Yeah,
that's a good thing, though.
No, I mean, he's got a great Twitter account too, where he publishes like the soldier, like just days from soldier diaries.
See, Jim, the one thing you do need to do though, because he's sister, he has all the books behind him. You need to have like a big bathrobe and a pipe, like that author at home pose with a big leather chair, because it would totally work. It would totally work with his background. That would work for him. And it's not a fake background like the one you. It's a real one. It's awesome.
You watch, he'll show up to the live.
Oh yeah, God, he totally should. He totally should. I'd love that. That'd be freaking hilarious. But anyway, all right, why don't we jump off? It's about 11:30. We're gonna jump off a little bit early today. I know we were off a little bit late, but we got stuff to do. We got plans afoot this afternoon. We got shenanigans planned today, so we're gonna jump off. So anyway, so we'll do the draft riots. We'll record that this Thursday, and then we'll do the crater. We're gonna talk about Ledley and his drinking. We'll have fun with that. Yeah. And then we're gonna talk about Jubal Early and John McCausland and all these people for the best second Kernstown. There was a second Kernstown. I didn't realize it's the second, but we're gonna talk about that. A lot of fun stuff coming. So anyway, hopefully it's cool where you are. It's the humidity apparently here, Mary, as you know, is broken quite a bit. It was actually very comfortable yesterday on that boat. It wasn't too hot and too steamy. Not that you would have noticed, admittedly, but oh God. But it's all good. All right. So guys, have a great rest of the weekend. Thanks for jumping on with this on this Sunday morning. It's Saturday, it's Sunday, Sunday, but off we go. So guys, stay safe. Hopefully everything, you have a great rest of the weekend. Mary, again, we'll talk to you here in a little bit. Yeah. And we'll look forward to talking to you all soon. But again, thanks for supporting. We really, really appreciate this little stupid thing we do, but it's definitely fun. We enjoy it, and hopefully you do too. All right. So guys, have a great one. We'll talk to you all soon.
See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.